Welcome back to Cosmosis or Whatever. I'm Celia Marie 1243, your fairy tarot sister. I'm saying that again. Psychic medium, energy worker, and mentor. Here on this podcast, we talk about everything in the universe and how it's all connected. So, spiritual stuff, healing, life, the numbers you're seeing, what you ate for breakfast, maybe not, but kinda in the grand scheme of things, right? So all of it's connected. In this episode, we are talking about a topic that was actually suggested to me on TikTok. Shout out to Drew. So as most of you know by now, I chopped my hair off. Yeah, and if you didn't know that, then definitely go take a look, because I did. I chopped my hair off. But when I revealed it on TikTok, I said that my Saturn return was ending, and then I felt like it was the perfect time to kind of, have a big change. I've always wanted to cut my hair, and yeah, I think the Saturn return, excellent time. So Drew asked if I was open to talking about how I've changed during my Saturn return, and I am so down because, I think I've thought about it here and there on and off, but I haven't really sat down and necessarily talked it out, and I did a little bit of research. I actually went through, some of my memories from when I was going through my Saturn return, and I discovered so much more than what I really knew. Just knowing the dates and times, and, I think it puts it into perspective a lot more about what my Saturn return has kind of done for me. So I'm excited to talk about it. All right, so here we are. First off, what is a Saturn return? So for all my folks who are not astrology people, don't worry. I'm not going to lie. I wouldn't consider myself an astrology expert. I'm learning things here and there. I have my little astrology Bible. I can't remember what the name of that book is, but it's on my Amazon store. If y'all want to check it out, it's very, very helpful. I don't have it open in front of me right now, which I probably should. But, yeah, not an astrology expert. You know how they say that people who were good at math growing up are good at astrology, and people who were good readers are good at tarot? I feel like I fit into that exactly, because as a kid, I was a really, really good reader. I was always reading way above my grade level. I think by third or fourth grade, I was reading at a college level. But on the math part, no bueno. I'm not going to get into it, but it wasn't my strong suit. Still isn't. But I just think that's really interesting. So if you haven't heard that, that's something to definitely ponder on, because it really just goes to how your mind works. I feel like astrology is a lot more sciencey, right? Because we're working with degrees and numbers and stuff like that with all the transits. But then when it comes to tarot, energy reading, the stuff that I'm doing, my forte, it's a little bit less structured. You have to depend a little bit more on intuition versus having answers black and white. So, yeah, that's just a little disclaimer, but I have been doing a lot of studying, learning. So, I do know a planetary return is when whatever planet you're referring to comes back to the same spot that it was in when you were born. So, for example, the sun takes 365 days to get back to the same spot. So that's why your birthday is called a solar return, right? So different planets take different amounts of time to get back to their original spot in your chart. And so Saturn cycle, I've done a lot of research, let's be honest, I've been Googling since I started my Saturn return, or I learned about what it was. And I've seen a lot of varying things. I think, depending on what system of astrology you're using, because there's different ones, and what rules you go by, there could be different ones. But on a general, in a general consensus, your Saturn return happens anywhere between like the age of 27 to 29. Okay, so your girl is 29 years old. I'm 29 and a half, actually, now that I think about it. Interesting. But yeah, I'll be 30 this year, so I am basically finishing up, if I haven't already finished up, my Saturn return. And yeah, like I said, reflecting on the things that have happened, it's been very, very interesting. So what does a Saturn return mean, right? Not what I just explained, but what does Saturn rule? So Saturn actually rules Capricorn. Saturn as a planet represents kind of like limitations, fears, restrictions, and responsibilities. So it's really like a planet that forces you to grow up, right? Which makes sense that you would have your Saturn return right around the time when you're about to be 30, because I think, that's a pretty big birthday for a lot of people where, it's almost like you actually feel like you're an adult once you're 30. I don't know how I feel about that one. Maybe we'll talk about it in a different episode, or maybe it'll come up later in this one. But yeah, so when you go through your Saturn return, basically you're being forced to get disciplined. And depending on what planet Saturn is in your birth chart might also influence that. So I'll talk a little bit about that too. So I found out that my Saturn return started around April or May 2021. So that's if we're going by the 28, people who say that it starts at 28. And that is wild. And I'm going to tell you why right after this. As I was saying, I actually used a Saturn return calculator. You could just Google one if you want to see when your Saturn returns are going to be. Because, since it's on a 27 to 29 year cycle, you have a couple of them, depending on how long you live, of course. So you can see when yours is coming up or the ones that you've already had, and you can go through and kind of figure out what significant changes, what responsibilities and things you started to take over during that time. But yeah, so I used the Saturn return calculator. So April/May 2021, going by like the 28 year cycle. But then if you really look at it, some people do say 27 is when you start your Saturn return. And that would make sense to me, honestly, just because if we went by the 27 year cycle, then that would put my Saturn return right around April or May 2020, which is wild because that's like when our whole little panorama started, right? The Panini Press. And that is actually a huge time when my life started changing, other than, COVID and stuff like that. But going back to, so I'll talk about both, and just all of it, because it's been wild, really, just looking back. Like, I looked back at my Snapchat memories during those times. I looked back through my social media during those times, and I guess I didn't put together how much I went through during those times. It's really crazy. So April 2020, let's talk about that first. So April 2020 is around the time that my twin flame and I broke up for the first time, I believe. It's so interesting looking at these patterns. Astrology really is wild. And I didn't realize all of this was happening as it was happening, right? This is all just me looking back in retrospect. But, yeah, so around that time, and if you guys, some of you guys have asked me before, on TikTok, how did I start my spiritual journey? And honestly, it started in 2020. And I feel like breaking up with my ex breaking up with me, he broke up with me for the first time, which sounds really ugly. I'm always very embarrassed to say that because we went back and forth breaking up with each other so many times. It was not cute to me, but I digress. I think, yeah, honestly, guys, it's so crazy for me to sit back and think about, because I didn't, like, I knew that it was like around that time, but just the way the dates play out, right? So literally around that time is when he broke up with me the first time. That is when my spiritual awakening started happening. Like, it was already kind of creeping up because I was already watching tarot videos. My third eye is literally throbbing. That's wild. That's crazy. Ow. Okay. So I had started watching tarot videos and whatever, like, before then. I was always really interested in stuff like that, but I always thought it was evil. I grew up, in a Christian household, so, like, that wasn't a thing. But, yeah, we broke up in April 2020. And I went into a depression. I spiraled into, like, this dark abyss. But at the same time, I had to kind of keep on, like, a happy face because there was still other things that I had to do. I was already kind of working on social media. Like, I've always wanted to be on social media, even before it was, like, a thing, like, for real. You know how, like, back in the day, like, there were a couple of people who were, like, famous on social media, and it wasn't, like, a job, really, that was, like, normal for people to do. I wanted to do it back then. I didn't know what I was going to do. If you would have asked me then, I probably thought I would have been some, like, fashion guru, which I feel like I'm laughing very loudly in my head about that, because I was just telling somebody the other day how I made a YouTube channel and my only video was, like, me doing a haul, quote unquote, but I was, like, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, and I was hauling my own clothes from my closet, and my whole thing was like, oh, I'm going to try and show you guys how to do it on a budget, whatever. I'm getting off topic, as I do. But I always wanted to be on social media, but I was getting into it. So I started kind of doing social media, but I was more just posting, like, dance videos, trends, funny stuff, whatever. I hadn't obviously moved into, like, the tarot space yet, the spiritual talk, as they call it. So I bought my first tarot deck actually in April 2020, which is really cool to think about. I started reading. I immediately picked it up super easily. Mind you, I studied my ass off. I'll note that too, because a lot of people, when they ask me, like, how did you learn tarot so fast? I was charging after, like, 4 months. I honestly think it's because it's part of my purpose. And I was right there in my Saturn return, getting ready to, step into my responsibilities. And I do feel like, as far as my responsibilities are concerned, using my gifts is part of that, right? So yeah, that got kind of deep. But yeah, I also graduated in June of 2020. So I was in my senior year of college, which was really chaotic. There was a lot going on where, we had to do class from home, which was hard. I graduated with a degree in art. My concentration was graphic design, so it was hard to kind of, like, put our portfolios and last projects together like that. We were supposed to have a showcase. We didn't. That sucked. But yeah, I didn't end up having a graduation ceremony, which I was really looking forward to. My family was supposed to come out. They didn't come out. Actually, my family didn't even remember that I was graduating on the day that I graduated, and I feel myself getting emotional about that. Yeah, I celebrated my graduation from college after all these years with my friend Rochelle. Shout out to you, Rochelle. I bought a cake for myself. She was on another island because when she was in my graphic design classes, but when we got sent home to work from home, or, do school from home for the panorama, she went back to her island that she lived on. So we Skyped and she played Pomp and Circumstance for me. And it was kind of the biggest part of the celebration, I guess. And then later, my friend Savali, shout out to you, Savali, she organized something with my unit that I was with at the time. They came by. But, you know, just not being able to walk after doing all of that work was very sad for me. I was depressed. I was struggling with money at the end of school. Like, school was very expensive. I paid for most of it myself. And yeah, it was rough. I was really going through it. So it was very interesting to kind of like look back on that time. So then when we talk about April 2021, that is when I actually broke up with my ex for good. And so that's crazy to me because it's just like I told you guys. So from 2020 to 2021, we broke up a total of 4 times. And for those of you guys who don't know, my ex is also my twin flame. So I don't know, you know, what your guys' beliefs are on twin flames. I know people are skeptical, but this is literally what I do for a living. I've met so many different twin flames. I don't think of them the same way that everybody does. I don't tend to romanticize twin flame relationships. That's only because I've learned from experience, these experiences that I'm telling you. But yeah, so that relationship, I think, honestly, was a very pivotal part of my Saturn return and overall my growth as an adult, I want to say, honestly. Kind of learning to stand up for myself. I feel like, again, we went back and forth so much. He broke up with me twice. I broke up with him twice. And I think I broke up with him twice after he broke up with me twice, right? So I think me breaking up with him was kind of me stepping into my responsibility for myself, honestly, because I'm not going to get into too many details about that relationship, but it was a hard relationship. I learned a lot about myself during it. As twin flames do, we tested each other's boundaries. I learned a lot about what I did not want in a relationship, what I did not want out of a partner. And it is notable to say that my Saturn placement is actually in Aquarius. So if you guys don't know what that means, Aquarian energy is very outgoing. It's pretty like out of the box thinking. Aquarians are known for being kind of like weird. And I feel like that is one thing I could say about my Saturn return in general is like I've definitely stepped more into myself. So going through that relationship and kind of really realizing that I might have been bending things to kind of fit where I wasn't supposed to, and that's why they hurt so much, you know? But it's really crazy to just think about that. Maybe I'll talk more about the twin flame dynamic and what kind of happened, but that was a really, really big part of my Saturn return that I didn't even realize till I was looking at it. But to answer Drew's question, directly, how have I changed during my Saturn return? I feel like I've honestly tapped a lot more into my masculine energy. And I feel like a lot of you who have been with me on social media since my Saturn return, since 2020, since I start kind of like gaining a little bit more of a following on social media, you guys have noticed it, right? Not necessarily just by like appearance, but you know, the energy. Masculine energy is definitely about going out and like doing things. Feminine energy is a little bit more about receiving. And I feel like for a while, I've always had a lot of masculine energy, but I don't think I was comfortable tapping into it. So that has definitely been a really big thing. Even with this haircut, honestly. And I'll talk more about the haircut specifically in another episode for sure. But moving on, next, how have I changed? I feel like and I guess these all kind of feed into each other, but I'm way less concerned with how I'm perceived. now versus how I was in 2020. I think it actually kind of started a little bit before then, but I think I've really grown into that. Like I've really stepped into it and I'm comfortable there. Like I think going through college, being an older, like non-traditional college student, because yeah, I was 27 when I graduated, 27, 28 when I graduated, 27, I think. I told y'all I'm not good at math. But being that age when I graduated, or like being older when I went through college, and already having gone places for the military. Oh, that's another thing. I didn't even say that. I quit. I got out of the military during my Saturn return, which was also like a huge, huge thing. Sorry, I keep skipping around. Like, I have ADHD. If you're not new here, you already knew that. But just for the people who might be noobs and are just popping in on this episode or whatever, like, just saying. So it's all relevant though, in some way, because cosmosis or whatever, it's all connected. You like how I did that? Okay. But yeah, I got out of the army in November of 2021, which doesn't seem that long ago, if I'm being honest. And I feel like, I'm getting emotional, I feel like that was one of the hardest decisions that I have ever made. I think joining the army was honestly one of the best decisions that I could have ever made, because I learned so much. I grew so much. I met people. I traveled places. I just experienced a lot. And I really feel like, I always tell people, I grew up in the army because I joined when I was 19 years old. I did, I think, around 11 years of service, 10, 11 years. Actually, I think it was like almost exactly 10 or something like that. Told you, the math thing. But it was a really hard decision getting out of the military, but with everything else going on, my spiritual awakening still very much at a peak. Even then, even like, I think I really just kind of understood my purpose more. And that's another way that I've changed, is and if you guys have heard me talk about purpose, you'll know that I don't see purpose as like a destination where like you finally get to it and like, oh, I realized my purpose and that's it. Like, I think it's something that kind of develops throughout your life. But I think even now I'm understanding more and more of my purpose, but I think the big pivot was around that time. As I've gone through my Saturn return, I've realized my own path. The military always felt kind of like a security blanket as far as finances and things like that were concerned. Like, oh, I wanted to do a double retirement. When I joined the army, I thought I was going to end up, doing 20 years and end up doing a double retirement from another government job. But I also always wanted to go to school. I was also very artistic. And I always have had this entrepreneurial side of me since I was little. My mom is an entrepreneur. My dad, he's a hustler. He's always just like doing different things. So I definitely had that running through me. But I think it was something that I really had to kind of, the security, the comfort of having something to fall back on, basically, and really just trusting in myself was something that I had to step into. And I definitely think I did, because I got out of the military and now my full-time job is giving people readings. Developing tools, helping people understand their past lives, helping people understand their karma, how to heal, how to step into their psychic abilities. Like, I've realized that those are huge parts of my purpose, that I'm meant to do something different, that I'm meant to be an out-of-the-box thinker. So, results may vary with your Saturn return, and I would definitely look at what sign your Saturn placement is in, just to see a little bit more about what might or what already did happen for your Saturn return. But hopefully that's giving you guys some insight. For those of y'all who are nosy, that is give you a little bit of a peek into what has happened. But I'm really curious about other people's Saturn returns, and if, the fact that mine was in Aquarius, how much weight that actually had on it, or, do people usually go through that kind of thing anyway, or like what different ways it works. So maybe we'll talk about that on like a live or something like that, but hopefully you gain something from this. It'll help give you a little bit of insight to what Saturn returns are and how I've personally changed during mine. Thank you for listening. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.